the one hand, I'm encouraged by that you're a bad autocrat. But so in other words, autocrats.
You could have done so much.
Autocrats
with your magic wand just now.
can really wave that magic wand.
I need to think more about how I would act if I were an autocrat. And I'm not sure if some of those projections have even taken into account the fact that we're going to have climate refugees who are also, coming toward us. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted because there's a snake moving toward us.
Oh my gosh!
I'm not sure what type it is, but it's beautiful.
Hello, Boulder and the wider world. This is the Sharing Boulder podcast. My name is Philip Ogren, and for our 9th episode, I sat down with Nicole Speer near her house in Tantra Park. Nicole is considering running for city council this fall and has a lot to say about the city's most pressing issues, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, housing, and transportation. We covered all these subjects and more, including what 14-year-olds worry about and the CU South annexation proposal. Nicole brings a wealth of leadership experience to the table and articulated what it means to be a visionary and inclusive leader that brings people together in the face of crises and change. Program note: Nicole was very generous and gracious with her time and energy to help make this episode possible. A couple days before this conversation, we recorded another conversation in the much noisier North Boulder Park, and the footage was too challenging to work with. I hope you don't mind the relatively quieter and more peaceful noises in this second attempt to record outdoors, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation with Nicole Speer. Hi Nicole, thank you for meeting again. So I had this brilliant idea of meeting in a park, and this is our second attempt. Start off by please introducing yourself and why you're thinking about running for city council.
Sure. Thanks, Philip, and thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. So hopefully we can get by this time without cowbells and
food trucks ringing their bells and
exactly.
Motorcycles riding by.
So my name is Nicole Speer. I've lived in Boulder for 16 years now. My husband Jeremy and I came out in 2005 to work at the university as postdocs, and like many people, once we got here we really loved it, and we started having children and decided that this would be a perfectly fine place to set down some roots. So I am currently managing CU Boulder's brain imaging research facility, and I also work in some different capacities in the community. I volunteer with the Boulder County NAACP. I just recently stepped down as a trustee for Bixby School, a nonprofit in South Boulder, and I also serve with my church, First Congregational Church in Boulder. And I think just kind of in the context of all those spaces over the last few years, one thing that has sort of come out to me is how can I be of more service to the community? How can I use the skills that I've developed and that people here have invested in me to kind of give back to the community? And, the thing that kind of came to mind for me is that one of the skills that I've been intentionally developing over the last decade, but really my entire life, is leadership. How do you kind of bring people together, communicate well, and kind of get everybody moving toward the same goal so that we can make progress. And last year, getting through the COVID pandemic was really the thing that kind of solidified this for me. Our research facility basically operates as a nonprofit or a small business. We don't really get much support from the university. We have to kind of generate our own revenue and business. And so when the pandemic hit and we were forced to shut down pretty much overnight, like a lot of businesses and places in town, we were just kind of trying to figure out what are we going to do, right? We have, a dozen employees whose livelihoods are riding on our ability to stay open. We have, tens of millions of dollars in research projects that need to keep going, or they're at catastrophic loss of or catastrophic failure, right? And so we we kind of decided, all right, we got to figure this out. We have to figure out how to do human research where we're bringing people together from all over the state during a global pandemic when we have no idea, how this virus was even transmitted, back in March when it first started. So we started just trying to figure out, how do we address this problem that is huge that nobody has ever thought about before in this context. And the way that I tend to approach leadership is by being very inclusive and really trying to get everybody who is affected by decisions in the room talking to understand, how can we move forward together, right? How can we create a solution that is not going to leave anybody behind? And that the voices that I especially listen to are those that are most vulnerable. So, in this context, we have students, undergraduate students, who are in running some of the research studies. We have world-renowned principal investigators, right, who are funding the studies. And we really needed to hear all of their voices in order to figure out how to move forward. And so we spent probably 5 or 6 weeks just talking to people in our community, trying to understand, what are your concerns with coming back to work in this context where we don't know how this deadly virus is transmitted, right? Listening to them, hearing them, and what we landed on after 5 or 6 weeks was a plan for reopening that really reflected everybody's best thinking. And we didn't get to a place where every single person was, 100% confident that this was safe and we were all going to be okay, but it was really our best thinking, and everybody got behind this effort. And so we were able to reopen in June of 2020, just a few months after we had been shut down. And when we did so, we basically had all of our studies caught up by the time we got to the fall. We were one of the first facilities in the country to reopen, facilities of our kind to reopen, and we stayed open the entire time, right? And I really think it's because of this willingness to not treat some people's opinions as more important than others, and really just to listen to the people, and especially the people who are putting themselves most at risk coming into the facility and showing up to get this research done. And that's sort of the approach, that I really think is most important right now in the context of all these different crises that we're in, right? We're not going to get through if we're just listening to a few voices. We really need to be paying attention to everybody and bringing everybody's best thinking to the table, and we need leaders who can recognize that.
That's great. I two themes that I heard that came out of what you just said is, one is you're kind of trying to make the best decisions you can with the information you have at that time, because 5 to 6 weeks out from when the pandemic hit, it's like everyone was scrambling to figure out what's the right thing to do. And then this idea of hearing people's voices. A lot of students were really put in a bind at that time with where am I going to live? I'm going to live on campus. I'm going to go back home. How do I keep my research assistantship going with an imaging lab or whatever? I don't know what the roles of your staff was, but I assume that you had people in your staff that were really like, what is next for me, right?
Right. Yeah. No, we really did. And, just I think honoring people's emotions is really important too, right? It's not okay to address something completely unprecedented and, that's incredibly stressful, and not give people the space to process that. And that was one thing that we spent just a lot of time doing as well, as talking through, how does it feel to be living through this really unprecedented situation? What do we need to do to take care of each other and ourselves and our families in order to make sure that we can show up and do our work as well?
And that's tricky in the context of principal investigators who have, by default, sort of a lot of power. Their interests often take priority because they've got the research grants on the line, and they got to keep those studies moving forward. And it's like, so to expand your decision making beyond those priorities is a good challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, one of the things that I kind of fundamentally believe about group decision making and, being a part of a team is that the people who are most affected and most kind of involved in the details and the process really are the ones who have the ideas around solutions, right? So when, the leaders are putting in place an overarching vision or some goals, right, that people are trying to achieve, and then you just empower the people at different levels, right? The managers, the research teams, to think about, how can I contribute to this goal, right? What is the work that I can do to try to get us faster to this goal? You're really going to get to a place where we can move forward really quickly, and that sort of empowered decision making is really one of the things that I would like to see within our city. Just having this, having council be the people who are setting the vision, the goals, right, and then empowering the city manager to be the person who is guiding her staff on how best to implement that goal. Because when we get to a place where the top level of leadership is trying to determine how city staff, for example, are going to be best implementing their jobs, we're really taking a circuitous route around the person who's really tasked with figuring out how to implement those goals, right? And I would imagine that me as a council person would not I'm not ever going to be able to have the level of knowledge that our expert city staff have, right? So how can the folks in the kind of top level of leadership empower everybody to think about the ways that we can find these solutions, and that I saw that
by
work
bringing
incredibly
them into
well.
the conversation, right?
Exactly.
And
That's
listening
right.
to them, trusting
That's
them.
right. Trusting their expertise, right? And trusting that when we have clear goals, the people who have the direct knowledge of how we can reach those goals are going to be the ones in the best position to advise us.
So I'd like to dive into that just a little bit more. Last night I read your op-ed about the Tipton team report. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Do you mind just explaining what that report was, and then what your kind of analysis of what you took away from that?
Yeah, this was basically a report that was done, which council was it? I think maybe the 2015, 2017 council. It was a few years ago. They implemented this report where a group came in, an outside group came in, and basically assessed, what is sort of the culture of some of our city departments, right? And what we're seeing in some departments is really high turnover of staff, and so they were kind of looking into what's going on here. And one of the things that they found is that there's really this culture where staff are not feeling empowered in those departments to kind of do their jobs, and they're kind of they were, at least at the time, getting conflicting messages around what is it we're supposed to be doing. And when I see something like that, I mean, staff turnover for me is one of the kind of signs that something is like wrong within an organization, right? Something is not working, especially because we have such excellent city staff. I mean, people come here from all over, right, to live and work in our city. And we really need to be thinking about why that's the case. And as I was reading that report, what sort of stood out for me was just some issues around governance, and how people think about their different roles within the city. In my work on a nonprofit board, this was something that I sort of had to learn. What is the role of somebody who is essentially in an advisory council position, right? What is the role of the person who is tasked with managing everything, and then what's the role of the folks who are actually implementing all these policies, and sort of the boots on the ground people who are doing the work. And organizations work really well when people kind of stay within their lanes, right? So at the highest level, it should really be around setting vision, setting some goals, right, priorities, overseeing the budget, and then overseeing the top level leader, right? In our case, that's the city manager with our style of government. And then, it really should be figuring out how are we empowering that person to go and, and then, empower the staff. Our new city manager, I haven't met her yet, but as far as I could tell from her town hall, she is an exceptional leader. And if, we can empower her to think about ways to get our departments in line with our goals, I really think we're going to be in a good position.
Where the rubber hits the road for me is those core values in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, which kind of embody lots of change, right? There's a lot of aspirational good stuff in those core values, And after reading your op-ed, it felt like uh, the two poles that were causing conflict were like, there's the core values and the things that we could be doing that are already in place that would align with that. And then city council is over here saying, oh no, we better slow down on all this, anything that looks like change here. Um, so,
Yeah. It does feel like that at times.
well, that's encouraging. I'm a little skeptical of anyone who, and this, it's funny coming from me. I have all these opinions about what I think the solutions are, but it's a complex city, and we have a lot of externalities that we're dealing with that are difficult to address. And I feel hopeful when you say that it's about how to make everyone's role work better, right? Because then it's not just like we're not just looking to some leader to
Yep.
tell us what to
Yep.
do next,
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right. And that is the role of the leader, right? They're the
yeah,
ones who are supposed to help facilitate everybody else's work,
yeah,
not to direct it,
yeah.
right?
That's great. Um, so I want, just before we leave this subject, uh, I really like the notion of visionary leadership, of providing a positive vision, because I feel like we have a lot of apprehension and anxiety around change, and the YIMBY crowd, which I'm a part of, wants to see more housing and denser, more compact neighborhoods, and the NIMBY crowd is upset about that, right? And I feel like uh, the ability to articulate a vision that's like really positive, and people can see, hey, that looks pretty good. How do you do that?
Yeah. That's a really good question. You know, I think one of the things, I'm gonna just note this. I try to not use language that's really that some people find hurtful, right? And so like NIMBY, YIMBY,
Oh, sure.
right?
Okay, sorry.
Like those things.
I
So
came out swinging.
yeah, no. So and and I certainly I try to think about what are people's concerns, right? What is really the heart of people's opposition? Because there's generally, right, a real concern there, that there's
Yeah,
something that people are afraid of. And I think that if we can get to a place of understanding what it is that people are truly afraid of, right? Those are generally actionable things that we can address,
yeah,
right? Not by kind of blanket preventing any change, but thinking about, oh well, if you find out your concern is around transportation, for example, and having 12 more cars on your street, well, let's think about maybe how we can start designing some of these communities in a way that are going to make it so that we don't need cars, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think that is the way that I generally try to get to people and have these conversations, is to really get to the underlying concern, not just this is going to change our neighborhood, but like, okay, yes, and what are those things that you're most concerned about with regard to change? And I think if we can get to that place, then we can start having conversations about what is it that we need. And I think there's a great example over. So we're in Tantra Park for those who didn't see that, right near my home, and we've got CU South in the annexation that is kind of coming up right now, and the
stirring up a lot of
yes,
emotional
yes,
response.
yes. No, it is, right? And
Yeah,
it's because it's
it
change,
is
and change
big.
is scary, and change is, even if it's positive change, it's still stressful,
Yeah,
right? I think it's important for us just to keep that in mind. There's a lot that change brings to us and the way that we show up in the world. But our little neighborhood was involved in some conversations with the city last winter, right? And some folks in my neighborhood have been really concerned about what having more housing in particular is
yeah,
going to change about our little neighborhood, and what access is going to look like on that property once it starts being changed. And in the course of this conversation with the city, when we started getting at what people's concerns are, they were concerns around having more car traffic, they were concerns about having housing, denser housing built right next to some of my neighborhood's single-family homes.
Yeah.
And when we start understanding those concerns, we can actually make changes that will not prevent things from happening, right? And because we absolutely need flood mitigation, and that's what city studies have identified some of the CU South land as being the best spot to protect thousands of lives and residences on the north side of Table Mesa. But when we got to the issue, the real issues that people were concerned about, well, we now have some ideas around trip caps for that property, right? We have one of the streets that goes right by a middle school that we have in this neighborhood is now going to be kind of a limited access road rather than a main way in, and we have a buffer zone now between our neighborhood and any potential housing that would be developed there in the future. So I think all those things are helpful, and then I think also just helping to remind people about what the time scale of some of these changes are. So the way that I look at what's going on at CU South, and I say this with my CU employee hat on that watches the pace of change there, right? And where money comes from for
and
new
you want
projects.
to see CU thrive and succeed.
No, absolutely. And it but I am likely to be in a retirement community by the time housing comes into this area, right? And I think that's an important thing for us to keep in mind. It's not, as we start these changes, they're not going to happen overnight. These are things that are going to take, decades or more. And they're the sorts of things that unless we start now, people in the future are going to be in a lot worse space than we are in right now, right? And truly, the way that these changes will unfold, it's going to be at a pace that for most of us will be pretty tolerable.
I lived at the graduate student housing at Smiley Court for a number of years when I was in graduate school, and at that time, I remembered they were saying that those were overdue for being demolished.
Yes.
And 10, 15 years later, they're still there.
That's
they
right.
don't look like they're going anywhere.
Right.
And I can imagine that the logistics of replacing that at that location without something else to help buffer that. I mean, I don't know the details. I'm just speculating.
And I think and that point about housing for CU folks, right? That's really important.
Oh yeah.
Because there are within my my team at work, I now, other than some of my students, none of my staff are able to live in Boulder anymore.
Wow.
And it just, I mean,
is that because they don't have access to the housing at the graduate?
They basically
housing?
don't have housing that can meet their needs. So one of my employees is just in the process of buying some property in northern New Mexico. Another one of my employees just moved out to northeast Longmont. Right, we are losing our workforce.
Can I push back on that just a bit? When you say meet their needs, I kind of like what the reaction I have is like, they don't like the housing that's there. It's not nice enough.
Right. No. So it's not that. It's just it's more around being able to afford something. So one of my employees, for example, had lived in Boulder for decades, right? But because housing prices have increased so much,
that employee
sold,
I see.
right? Sold the housing he had here, but it wasn't anything near enough to buy another home in Boulder, right? And we really do. We need different housing for different stages of our lives, right? And I've heard there are retired folks who are leaving our community as well because they need a single-story home and they cannot find that here, even if they've lived in Boulder, for 40 years. They sell their home and they can't afford
or almost,
the housing
almost
that
worse,
they need.
They stay where they are in a very large house by themselves, which there's a lot of housing that's way under occupied, which is an interesting demographic trend. So let's dive into housing and talk about that. So let's see. How did I want to dive into that?
You're welcome to look at your notes.
I remembered one question, a technical question I had. Do you know what it means? Like this is just brushing up against my ignorance. What does it mean to have trip caps?
So it basically limits the number of cars that go in and out of a space during
how do you limit
during
it?
the day. That is a really good question. I don't have an answer to that one.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to look into that
All right.
and get
Yeah.
back
I
to
mean,
you.
to me,
So
it's sort of like,
yeah,
well, how,
yeah,
people are going to drive where
yeah.
they're going to drive if
Right,
they have
right.
cars and parking. So,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good question. I'm gonna ask Claudia that question because I'm
Okay.
sure she will know.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, for me, I think about in terms of, is there is CU's bus system working, for
Yeah.
example, right? Is it like looking at ridership and stuff like that? But
Well,
I don't.
I always hope that someone will come along with a plan for some sub community that just involves a lot less parking and a lot
Right.
more car sharing
Right.
and shuttle type situations.
Yeah.
And I think the CU South is perfect because
Yep.
a lot of the people that would live there would be going to the same places, and
Exactly.
not everyone that lives there, not every adult that's there needs to have a parking
That's right.
place and a car sitting in that parking place.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. And I'm not sure, the degree to which people outside of the CU community understand this. I've heard, some people having concerns about people driving along Moorhead Avenue, for example, from CU
yeah,
South.
to race down to
But
Broadway.
parking is really limited on campus and it's incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And so, I don't actually see a lot of people choosing to drive. Especially if we can put in place some good, alternatives like some more protected bike paths.
Yeah.
And, CU really does a good job of shuttling students back and forth between, say, Williams Village and campus, right? They kind of have those types of systems down. And what's cool about CU South and thinking about this, again, not next year, but in 20 years or so, right, when they get this together, is that, it's a place where transportation design can be, thought about brand new, right?
Yeah.
It's not an existing kind of thing, right? And I also just, kind of want to call out, I think it is important for CU to think about how can they redesign some of their existing spaces, right?
Yep.
And also, make increase housing in some of the places they already have access to, because I know that's one of the concerns as well is, why are we developing more when we already have spaces set aside for this kind of thing, right?
Smiley Court's a perfect example of that. There's tons of parking
Yep.
in that area,
Yep,
and
exactly.
if they could reconfigure it for more people and
Yeah,
less cars,
that's
I
right.
think that would be a huge win.
That's right. No, it really would.
We're in the middle of a climate crisis right now, and I don't see a way out of that if we don't have large number of people's abandoning their cars.
Yeah.
And I think for graduate students to have, or postdocs or whoever's in that housing, I think we all need to live in neighborhoods that are compact and walkable. That's my vision, or my hope. If CU South can do something where a lot less single occupied vehicles, that would be really great.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think,
but why does it have to be 20 years in the future? Why can't they start building 2 years from now the housing that they need?
I don't know that they have the money to do that.
They don't. Okay.
But I don't know. Like I'm not, this is sort of me speaking, completely with my resident hat on, not my, CU employee hat on. There are lots of other things that, also kind of need addressing, and it's not. Yeah, so I'm not sure that's something that would have the option for. And I also just want to point out the only reason CU is even starting to talk about housing in that space is because we are forcing them to with this annexation agreement, right?
Yeah.
So it was not on their radars as something to think about, which is part of the other reason why I think it's still down the road. They don't even have a master plan or anything, for that space yet. And I think this is part of the concern, in the community and my neighbors is like, well, why don't they have this, right? But it's really the city that's sort of saying, all right, CU, if we're going to give you the, annex this land, you really need to tell us what's going to happen there. And, I can understand that too. If somebody came in and said, hey, Nicole, tell me what, you think your imaging facility should look like in 20 years. I'd kind of be thrown for a loop there as well, right? And the things that I would be putting out would be very general because I don't really know, what things are going to look like in 20 years.
Well, it's actually smart to, if you need housing 20 years from now, you better get started.
Yeah,
right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Around here,
yeah,
right?
No,
like
exactly.
It's
exactly.
a glacial pace.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, and I think it's so important for our community to to remember that the whole reason this is happening right now is because that land, part of that land, was identified as the spot for flood mitigation to prevent what happened in 2013. And for talking to folks who experienced that flooding, that was terrifying and traumatic, and it's still traumatic, right? So as a community, we need to be stepping up for our neighbors, and treating each other like a community, and recognizing that there are significant dangers to people's lives that we need to take care of. And once we move on, right, then we can get to the other areas of town that also need flood mitigation.
Totally. So I think we should move on from CU South, except that I do want to just be explicit, close the loop on one thing. So there was a big petition campaign, Save
Right.
South Boulder.
Yeah.
I assume you're against that. You didn't sign that petition.
I did not sign that petition, no. I have been a little bit distressed by the way that I see some of the facts about CU South being manipulated. I will use that word. That people saying that, well, they're gonna build a 300-acre campus over there. That's actually not true. The land is just over 300 acres, but the majority of that land is not going to be housing. It's not going to be developed in that way. CU is giving I think over 80 acres to the city for flood mitigation. There's another very large parcel that's going to be an option for the city to purchase for open space, to connect some of the open space that's already there with that. A lot of it is frankly unusable for housing because of how it will kind of be used in the flood mitigation process. And so it's going to be some of the same stuff like sports fields and things that are there right now. So some of those kinds of things, the talk about how we're going to have these huge buildings there, none of that is true. If you actually go in and look at what's planned, there are height limits. There's I'm completely blanking on the word right now, but it's basically saying that the line of homes that we have along the back here, nothing that's built there can really go above that line of homes, and it'll actually taper off, as you get closer to some of the open space and things. So, I absolutely understand people's concerns around things like transportation, and just what it's going to add to have so many more people in this area. Those are different things than what I saw the petitioners getting people
excited
aware
about.
of, right?
Great. Well, so a lot of those concerns that that revolve around that one location kind of proliferate throughout the city. So let's pivot towards kind of housing more generally, and maybe just start off by giving us a positive vision for how you would like to see housing in Boulder, how it should become more affordable, more inclusive.
Yeah. So I mean, when I think about the Boulder that I would like my kids to live in, for example, it's
there's a start. You would like your kids to live in Boulder, which is like let's start there, right? Because like a lot of kids can't afford to come back, right?
No, that's exactly right. And one of my colleagues at work, he grew up in Boulder. He went to Boulder High. He has been working for decades in Boulder, trying to buy a house here for 15 years.
Wow.
He still has not been successful, right? And that's like, this is somebody who grew up here, who really wants to be back here.
And it probably feels like it's
exactly.
It gets harder.
Yeah, it's getting
as time
farther
goes
away,
on.
right? Yeah, and I mean, like my own children. I mean, they're still young enough that they think they want to live with us, as they get older. And this is literally something that keeps my daughter up at night, is thinking about how am I going to be able to afford a home near my family, whom I love.
So your daughter
with
must be a
housing.
young professional who can't make enough money. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, she's only 14, so she hasn't settled on her career path yet. But
ouch.
unless she's some sort of startup billionaire or something like that, right?
My point was
it's
that
hard.
how sad is it that that teenagers
Absolutely.
like already understand that
that's right.
they're not going to get to live here
That's
someday.
right. No, exactly. And and that's heartbreaking for me as somebody who would love I hope that we still maintain, the family relationship we have now. And as my kids turn into adolescence and move on, they'll still want to live by me, because they're wonderful people and some of my favorite people in the world, right? And I want them nearby as we get older, right? So, when I think about that, it's really that we have these neighborhoods that are walkable, right? That don't have so many cars, that can meet people's housing needs across the lifespan, not just at specific points in time. I think there's really no way that we are going to be able to escape from the need for denser housing. There really isn't. And what I mean, we can say right now that we're fine with having over 80% of our residential land designated as single family housing, but we're going to have more people moving to the Front Range over the next 20 or 30 years, and I'm not sure if some of those projections have even taken into account the fact that we're going to have climate refugees who are also, coming toward us. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted because there's a snake moving toward us.
Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
not sure what type it is, but it's beautiful.
Do you mind if we take a quick diversion?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's grab the camera.
Let's go check out this neighbor that's coming to say hi to us this morning. Is it a bull snake? Yeah. I don't see a. Oh. There we go, yeah. They're so beautiful. I love these guys. They tend to hang out around some of the ditches around here. Yeah, so I mean, I think about just how many more people are going to need to be here, right? And I was just reading something this morning that was talking about how it's really, the more affluent areas that are responsible for the climate crisis, right? I mean, we really have done the bulk of the damage.
The carbon footprint of an average Boulder resident is enormous.
Yeah, that's right. And so, thinking about, for a city that values inclusion, right, and equity and justice, what is our role as the climate crisis proceeds, right, as more and more climate refugees, not just from around the world, but our own country start moving to places that are more livable.
Program note number 2. When I silenced my phone, it disabled the microphone that was recording the audio that was used for the first half of the episode. The remainder of this episode uses the audio from the video camera and is not as high quality. But I hope you will continue listening because Nicole has a lot more to say and the conversation keeps getting better.
How are we going to address this, right? And what is our responsibility? And these are questions that I don't necessarily have an answer to right now, right? I mean,
I think one of the things is let's make room for people, right? We have a lot of space in the city that's put to very poor use. Right. It kind of drives me crazy when I go around town. I see lots of parking lots that sit empty most of the time. Empty vacant lots near Baseline and Broadway, just as one example. In fact, the whole Baseline, if you just kind of go up and down it and think about how efficiently that space is used, it's kind of crazy how poorly used it is.
That's right. Yeah, we've given a lot of space in our community to cars, into planning for cars, and I don't think that's what the city of the future looks like, right? Or at least the sustainable city of the future looks like. And I think because of that, we have so many people, tens and tens of thousands of people who commute in to Boulder, right, when it's not a pandemic. And just thinking about what would it be like if those people lived here, right? I think about that also from the perspective of our city budget, which is so dependent on sales and use tax, right? The fewer people we have living and working in our community, the lower our city budget, right? And how are we going to get the revenue to respond to some of these crises and deal with this if we don't have that?
So the default answer to that question of what would it be like if more of those people could live here is the default mindset for most people that live here in Boulder is that would be terrifying. That sounds horrible. So for me, I love dense neighborhoods, and actually going through Boulder there's a big difference between some of the denser walkable neighborhoods and the single family. So is that kind of like maybe help give a vision of how great it would be.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I think is great is just that it enables a broader range of people to actually live here. And I'll just talk about my neighborhood for a little bit. So Boulder Housing Partners took over the Tantra Lake Apartments a few years ago, and since that time, our neighborhood has become much more diverse. And I don't just mean diverse in terms of race and ethnicity. I mean in terms of sexuality and gender and age. Right? We have a lot more older folks who are living there now. Just this wonderful range of people who are now in our neighborhood. And I used to think of us as being almost sort of a commuter neighborhood where people seem to kind of live here during the week, and then everybody was gone on the weekend. Right? Our houses are relatively small. I think people were probably just escaping to different places, but now our neighborhood is alive. It's a real neighborhood. We see people walking around, there are children playing outside, right? More families in the park. My kids can go over any afternoon and hang out at the park and make some new friends, right?
So when Boulder Housing Partners took over those apartments, did that increase the amount of housing, or it just changed the accessibility, the affordability?
Yep, exactly, and just allowed a broader range of people to come in to those apartments, and so it's really contributed. It has enriched the neighborhood around here in some really beautiful ways, and so I see that, right? But to have more here, right? To open up a space for more people to come, it tends to enrich all of our lives, and I think it's a sort of thing where we need to recognize that process of change involves grief, right? That's a hard thing to give up the places that you're used to being in and things like that. But what I'm afraid of is that if we don't start taking the spaces that already exist as housing and starting to change the way that we do housing in those spaces, we will ultimately start losing some of the spaces like our parks and our open space and those kinds of things, right? I'm completely with you on parking lots. I mean, we could double the size of our city at least, right, in terms of how many people we can sustain simply by getting rid of parking lots, right? And thinking about the city of the future, in my mind, it is not full of cars, and that's part of what makes things hard as a resident here, right? Is having more cars. I mean, our neighborhood being so close to 36. We moved here maybe 12 years ago, almost exactly 12 years ago, and we did not have this much noise. So I mean, if we're quiet, you can hear it. You can hear that noise.
The noise doesn't bother me. I think of it as sounding like the ocean a little bit. But the thing that does concern me is I live closer to US 36, I think, than you do. The air quality in Boulder is not very good, and there's a lot to say about that. But I didn't want to pivot towards that just yet, because what I wanted to ask you next is, what are some policy changes you'd like to see City Council tackle for improving the housing situation?
Yeah, I think there are a few different strategies that we need to take with that, and I think anytime you have a large problem that you're facing, you really need to approach it in terms of what do we need to do right now, right? What are the changes we can do right now that will have big impact tomorrow, right? As well as what are the things we need to start doing so that in 20 or 30 years down the road, we are in a better space. And like, I look to our open space for that kind of thing, right? This was something where 50 or 60 years ago, people said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had this, right? And we started building towards that. And now we have, this wonderful
you were making an analogy to open space, not eyeing open space as a place to build our housing.
No, absolutely not.
I heard it wrong.
No.
That took a turn.
Thank you. No. I have, just to be very clear, I have no interest in building housing all over open space. So,
I think it's one thing, like everyone who lives in Boulder agrees on that. So I was like, wow, you're going to be a real alternative candidate.
No. And I think with the climate crisis, right, it's even more important that we preserve these spaces that we have. Right? So no, I definitely do not mean that. But, in terms of things that I feel like we could change overnight that would start making a difference, within weeks, months, years, right? It would be changing our occupancy limits, right?
Bedrooms are for people?
Yes, with bedrooms.
Did you sign the petition?
I did sign the bedrooms are for people petition, and I do support the measure that they will have on
Great,
this
thank
ballot.
you.
So I really do believe we need that. And, part of that is coming from my observations as an employer in our community, right? We absolutely need housing for our workforce, because if we cannot house the people who work here, they will go and find jobs elsewhere. And already there are some groups in the community that are having trouble hiring people, because nobody can live at this point anywhere even near Boulder, right? So we will lose workers. Our businesses will suffer, and when our businesses suffer, we all suffer, because a lot of our economy is driven by our businesses, right? So it's critical that we start addressing this. The inability of people to live here by changing occupancy limits. I think letting people just sort of have the freedom to build ADUs. I mean, within we don't want structures that are not safe or anything like that, right? But I have a detached garage, and it would be wonderful if I could turn that into an ADU, so that, for example, my mother, who currently lives on her own, is in her mid-70s and has some chronic health issues, could actually live near us, and ride out the rest of her years with her grandchildren and us,
sadly,
right? I would love that.
Sadly, your 14-year-old won't be 14 forever either.
I know,
So
right?
I mean, that's also there's all kinds of possibilities there.
Right. Yeah. So, and or students or whoever else, right? But just that would be one housing unit that we could get, not overnight, but probably, as soon as we could get some construction people to come out and build it, right? And so, so some that kinds of things, right? Those are changes that we can make. I think, other cities are starting to look at eliminating single-family zoning, and I know that's an issue that, just saying that, my heart starts racing a little bit, right? And it's not just because, I'm thinking about what people are going to think when they hear me say that, but it's also thinking about that as somebody who lives in a single-family home, right? I do appreciate having some of the amenities that come with that, and that involves some sacrifice, right, for all of us. But it's not like if we change to single family zoning, all of it, or changed away from single family zoning, all of a sudden, overnight, I'm going to have, all 5 other houses in my cul-de-sac changing into, these triplexes or duplexes, right? This is, again, a change that would happen gradually. And I would love that for when my kids get old enough, if they want to come back to Boulder, because we've made it a wonderful, vibrant, inclusive space where young people feel welcome. I would love to be able, with the same footprint, to turn our home into a duplex or a triplex. And we have a pretty small lot. It's less than a quarter acre, and our home is about 1,500 square feet. So, but we could do it, right? We could figure out a design that would enable us to not really take up too much more space, but let my kids come live with us.
I guess I would push back on one thing you just said, and that is a quarter acre is so much land, especially when you multiply it across,
right.
the 8 billion people that live on the planet. And if we're not open to reconfiguring our single-family home zoning, do we expect other people in other cities to reconfigure theirs? I mean, how are we going to get out of our cars and live in compact neighborhoods if like a place like Boulder, which is so oriented towards fixing, helping the environment and address climate change. If we can't do that, who can?
That's exactly how I think about things too, right? And this is what I think is really cool about being the people who are courageous enough, right, to implement some of these changes, is that it's not just benefiting us, right? But it starts to create a model that other people can look to and say, hey, wow, Boulder did these really neat things, right? They're building these communities that people desperately want to live in because they're so, they're so sustainable. They don't have as many cars, right?
So I have just a bit of unsolicited advice for your candidacy, and that is, I've had frustration with trying to figure out differentiate between candidates, because what I have found in the past is people who are kind of secretly pro-density and would be open to single changing zoning don't say it out loud because it's so politically risky, you know. But the frustration I've had with that is that now I can't tell who really thinks what. Like all these candidates are saying basically the exact variations of the same thing, and so for me to have a candidate come out and say that I'm open to changing single family zoning is a real signal for me. So you may just get more support, more energy, more enthusiastic backers if you come out and with a strong stance on that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you know, and I do think that there are a lot of people in our community, right, across a lot of different ages and demographics, who really do see that what we are doing currently isn't working. I think that, you know, especially as a community that is majority white, that's starting to wake up to the racism, you know, in our country and how our cities were designed to exclude Black people and other people of color. You know, we're starting to realize, oh, hey, single family zoning was actually set up to keep our communities white, right? Maybe that's not, you know, something
have you read The Color of Law?
I have. So I have about 15 books that I am in various stages of, and that is one of them.
It's a really good book. When we interviewed Dave Ensign, he said the entire planning board read that book, and so I think it needs at least the Cliff Notes version of it needs to be in all of our kind of working vocabulary.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and it really is critical, right, that we start thinking about how to make our city more inclusive, because, you know, people are going to be moving to the cities that are inclusive, right?
Well,
and I think, you know, and I don't want to say that the only reason we need to do it is to stop people from leaving, because there's a bigger issue, right, that our community is causing harm to people of color right now. Our white majority community is causing active harm. It is painful for many people of color in our community most days, even just walking around our community, right? And so this, I don't know if you read my guest commentary from, I think it came out in early June, around, you know, the work that we all need to do on ourselves as white people living in a white majority community in order to kind of get rid of these personal biases that we all have, right? Because there's so many people who are working for racial equity and justice in our community, but ultimately, unless we all start working on ourselves and trying to undo these biases in ourselves, we're going to have a really hard time moving forward.
Yeah, I actually agree with that, but there's a part of me that pushes back on it in the following way, and that is, you know, it's almost like the article against critical race theory that you hear from like pro-Trump types. It's like, well, it's all just, if we all just had more love in our hearts, these problems would be fixed,
right.
You know?
Yeah, no.
And you know, single family zoning is one of these issues that's really, it really just cuts through, because it's kind of a structural legacy that comes out of a white supremacist history that we have. And we don't want to tell people that live in single family homes that they're racist, because they don't have racism in their hearts, right? They don't feel like they are racist, and yet that structure is just a clear lineage legacy of those systems that we put into place that really complete apartheid that was in place until the 1970s. And so what do we do with that? We're living in this legacy that we haven't addressed in any meaningful way yet.
Right,
so.
yeah. And this, you know, this is where we absolutely need these structural changes, right? We need to dismantle these systems of power that were put in place for really awful reasons, right? And we also need to bring people, to get people aware of, you know, the ways that even in their own lives, right, they are doing harm. And this is something where, you know, I think it's really important for all of us to understand, you know, we are humans and, you know, you and I are white humans, right, living in a society that is very white supremacist, right? That was designed for people like you and me, and you especially, to succeed, right? And so, you know, until we kind of get a lens that allows us to see a little bit more about how the things that we're doing every day, right, affect people. It becomes hard to push for these structural changes because it doesn't, there's a sense of urgency, right, that you get when you are really understanding the ways that these systems are hurting people and the ways that we are maintaining these systems by not understanding how we are complicit in them, right?
Yeah.
So I think, it really is, right? It's getting people in power who have the ability to listen to communities that have traditionally been excluded from positions of power and excluded from decisions, and then getting the community to kind of rally around that idea that we really do want to be an anti-racist community, right? And I think if we tell ourselves that we're not complicit in those systems of racism, we're going to really have a hard time overcoming that, right? Because whether I want to be racist or not, I am a white person who has grown up in majority white culture in a white supremacist country, right? I have those biases,
and
I don't
kind of
want
living the dream with a professional career in a single family home, and it's sort of like, what's
exactly
wrong
right.
with everyone settle down, the world's not so bad.
That's right. No, exactly.
One of the things that this brings to mind for me is, as you're thinking about how to bring people into that conversation, is that there's just an inherent power imbalance between the incumbents. I talked about this with the economist Taylor Jarowski, the incumbents and the newcomers, right? And the incumbents know who they are, and they have a lot of political power, and they're going to have very loud voices. And so to be able to, you don't want to dismiss them either. There are people at the table that should have a voice at the table. But when you're proposing a change to single family zoning, or even maybe just one development, Diagonal Plaza or something like that, those voices are going to be disproportionately loud because they're powerful. They know that those people, they know who they are, for starters. Like the people who will benefit from Diagonal Plaza, they don't know who they are. So anyways, it's just it. The rubber hits the road on this issue because
it really does. And I think one of the things that when I was considering whether or not I wanted to try to run for council, I started thinking about this last summer when some folks just sort of approached me about hey, Nicole, would you be interested in this? And the thing that I had to do before deciding that I was going to do this, because I don't do things halfway, right? If I give myself to something, I'm giving all of myself to something, right? Was to really figure out, are there enough people in this community who have a similar vision for what I want to see our city become, right? And how I want to see us rise to these challenges that we have, that we actually can make a difference. Because I had some friends who, are involved in other cities, have been in this city for, many, many decades. And they said, Nicole, the changes that you want to see, like the Boulder that you want to see, you're not going to be able to do that. And I'm the type of person that every time I'm told I'm not going to be able to do something just makes me want to go harder at it, right? But I really spent a lot of time talking with people in various groups all over the community, right? And yes, there is absolutely a group in our community that's very opposed to any kind of rapid change or denser housing or anything like that, right? But what I observed is that the people, they are outnumbered. They are very outnumbered, right? And there is a level of organization happening within our city around people who want to see us really make progress toward our climate goals, for example, who really want to see us make progress on racial equity. And those people are starting to recognize their power, right? And recognize the power that we can all have if we come together. And that's kind of a staple of how I approach leadership and how I will approach my campaign as well. That it's not just me, right? I can't do this alone. I don't have the knowledge or expertise to know everything about how we're going to do this. But there are thousands and thousands of people in our community who do have that, right? And if we can listen, if we can figure out how to empower our city staff, our city manager, all these groups in the community who are doing such good work, that's where we can start to see some real progress and become a progressive city.
Well, I just want to circle back to something. We started off by talking about your leadership expertise. So you do have expertise in leadership, which to me seems like, just such a key facet of your candidacy, or your pitch, to folks. So I'm glad you led off with that. And I just wanted to circle back and say, it's, even though you may not have expertise in all these areas, and you can't take it all in anyways, just being an expert on CU South, for example, requires a lot of paying attention, a lot of reading and whatnot. But having leadership expertise, to me, feels like a really important quality.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's really important, like whether it's me or another candidate, that folks are voting for, it is just so important that we are looking for inclusive leaders, right? People who are going to recognize that when we're making decisions, we have to be making decisions with people, not for people. Because if we're making decisions for people, we're not going to find the right solutions. Some people are going to be left behind, and usually it's the most vulnerable people who are those who are going to be left behind. And thinking about really becoming an inclusive city, we really need to be listening to the people who we have frequently excluded from positions of power, and not trying to tell them what we think they should do, but listen to what they're telling us we need to do in order to make things better.
If you do the solutions for people, you sometimes end up with the water well that doubles as a merry-go-round. Do you remember this thing?
No.
This is kind of a dumb digression. Maybe I'll edit this out. But there was this thing where they were trying to build wells for developing countries.
Yeah.
And they came up with this merry-go-round pump so that the kids could pump the water and spin around in a circle. And one of the key features of a merry-go-round is that it spins freely and
that's
fast.
Right. That's
and
right.
the kids lost interest after about half an hour.
Sure.
And then the women in the village who really needed the water were kind of had to use this ridiculous toy, to get their water out. So, it just sort of speaks to you give a solution to people that they don't want, or you really have to bring people in to make good decisions. That makes sense.
That's right. And this is we have so many people in our community who have brilliant ideas about how to address some of our most intractable problems, right? Because they're the people who are the most affected, and thinking about some ways that we can try to elevate their leadership and the guidance that they're giving us on these things. I think it comes down, for me, one of the main things is having leaders who will listen in the first place, right? And who understand that lived experience is often just as valuable, if not more valuable, than a PhD or many titles behind your name or something like that.
Well, that from running a lab or a business.
And this is where we had evidence of this during the COVID pandemic. Some of our best ideas came from the students who don't even have degrees yet, right? But there is a level of creativity in this town that is so exciting and energizing and inspiring, and that's what I hope to capture, right? And just elevate this need to pay attention to these voices.
Okay, so we covered a lot of major bullet points we were going for, but do you have time for another one?
Yes.
So the thing that I wanted to still touch on is transportation. So we kind of talked a little bit about it in terms of parking and cars, but maybe just talk about what's your vision for transportation. What's not working right now, and what do we need to do better?
So when I get around town, I do sometimes do so via car. We just have one car in our family, so it's usually a bit of a shuffle of who's got something big to haul. And, 4 people that need to go places in one car. Yeah, that's right. And 2 dogs. Sometimes need to go places too. So we have our one car, and we do use that. And then we also everybody in our family has at least one bike that that we are also using to get around town. And then we also walk and bus to get around. And, some of the, at least for me, some of the pain points that I feel when I'm not driving, well, actually, I feel pain points when I'm using every mode of transportation. So let me just kind of go through them. So with my car, I will echo what I think many people in Boulder are experiencing as, this the traffic. I have not adjusted yet to how much traffic it takes. And I one of these days I'm going to figure out how to not be consistently late for things that are at the north end of town, because I will remember that there's a lot of traffic when I'm driving, right? So so I think we all feel this pain point of traffic, right, and increased cars on the road. For bikes, it's really clear when you're biking around town that our city is designed for cars. Yes. Which makes it really hard to bike around town. And some of the things that I struggle with is that the quickest way, for example, for me to get to my office, which is kind of in almost to the area that's under consideration for the East Boulder sub-community plan. It's just in the sort of Arapahoe and Foothills
over by the police
area.
station?
Yeah. We are very close to the police station. There's no quick way for me to get there other than to go down 30th. Wow. And 30th is terrifying on a bike, absolutely terrifying. It is not protected. Visibility is hard for drivers. It's it's something where, and right now there's a lot of construction happening, and so when I'm biking, I'm basically having to merge with cars that want to go a lot faster than I can pedal, and I try to pedal as fast as I can, but I'm not that fast, right? So it makes it just really scary, right? And I don't feel comfortable taking my kids, for example, along that route or anything like that. That is just, it's not a place that feels safe because there's no protection.
Well, in that case, the good news is that change is coming, right? I haven't seen the plan, but it looks like they're putting in a lot of remediations.
And that and when I bike to my office, which is kind of the most frequent location that I bike to, it takes me about 2 minutes more than it takes me in my car. So it's really, especially with traffic and the construction now, right? It doesn't add that much more to my time. And I really would love it if I could do it without that stress of thinking that one of these days I'm going to get hit. And the other thing, that we're building all these underpasses, right, for bikes to go through, which also strike me as things that are made for cars, not bikes, because they seem designed to make car traffic smoother. From a bike perspective, I really dislike these underpasses because I don't know if it's just that my eyes are getting older, but every time I go in, the light change. There have been a couple of times now where I have nearly hit somebody because I cannot. My eyes just don't change fast enough. The bushes and things that we have outside that make the underpasses look so beautiful.
Interesting.
It's really hard to see.
Well, I've actually seen. I came upon an accident where a woman was laying with a pool of blood on her head because it was at the corner. A lot of the underpasses they have sharp curves right before them. So I always ring my bell several times as I'm entering and exiting those underpasses. I hadn't thought about it that way because. Really, like my perspective is that the underpasses are wonderful, and I never feel sort of more smug on my electric assist bike tootling through town than during rush hour when everyone's sitting in a parking lot in their cars and I'm sailing through the city on my bike.
Well, the underpasses, though, I mean, so those are, it's like $6 million, right, to build one of them. And when I think about there is, right, you can certainly zip under them, right, faster, but like is that where we should spend $6 million? I mean, that's a lot,
that's
right,
a lot
for
of
one
money
place. And when I think about how that money, could be used in smaller ways, right, or I don't mean smaller ways, I mean
more incremental type,
or less expensive projects that could make things better, on a broader scale. It really feels to me like these are designed not for bikes but for cars. And I think the way that you mentioned, how just the sharp turns, right, going in and out of these places as well. like we don't have turns that sharp usually when we're thinking about streets that cars are driving on, right? Because you have to slow down so much in order to do that. And when there are people walking through them, right, and you're having these light transitions, it's really important that you're slowing down. So I don't mean to say that, right? But if we were really designing in a way that was for bikes, we would be providing these kind of safer spaces that, you know, don't make you lose so much momentum. So I do not have an electric assist bike, and you know, one of the places that I'm getting north and south around town is going up by like Boulder High, you know, through University Hill, right? Every single time there's a turn that I am just cursing because I have to slow down so much to make that turn. Yeah. And then I have to try to pick up all that momentum again, you know, as I'm going back up the hill. And maybe I just need an electric assist bike, right? And that would sort of solve my problem. But I wish that we were designing in a way that prioritized bikes. And I think also it is important that we, you know, realize that not everybody in our city can bike, right? Some folks can't do that. So, you know, what are ways that we're providing alternative methods for people? That for me is where, you know, our bus system kind of comes in. And some of the things that I struggle with there is, for example, my office is about 3.5 miles from my home. If I drive there, I can get there in 15 minutes, 12, if there's, you know, if it's really early and there's no traffic. If I bike there, I can get there in 17 minutes. If I take the bus, it takes me about 55 minutes. Wow. Because I have to kind of go way west, and then I have to go back east.
Yeah, and it's not exactly door-to-door service either.
No, it's really
for
not,
the hour
right?
that you spend. You have to walk a lot, I'm sure.
That's right. And, you know, and for thinking about that, if we're really thinking about how we're designing a city that, you know, people, that sort of gets people out of the habit of using cars, we're really going to have to figure out how we can help people get to places in about the same amount of time as they are currently using their cars.
Yeah, well, and you know, if you're an RTD planner thinking about how to provide reliable service to single-family zoned neighborhoods where everyone has the convenience of parking and driving their own car, it's sort of like. I mean, it's really it's really a puzzler.
Oh, it is, right?
So and you know, my vision is like, as we increase people, we decrease the cars really radically, and so that it actually makes economic sense for RTD to provide that kind of service, or other providers. I mean, I can imagine, you know, CU South would have its own shuttle through the university or whatever.
That's right. Yeah. And I think some of these ideas around like little shuttles and you know, smaller buses and things like that, right? They're really interesting ideas, and thinking about how some of the newer developments that are being proposed, they're being proposed with these little shuttles, right? That will take people to different locations, which I think is, you know, is a good way of thinking about that, especially for folks that are mobility impaired.
Well, I would like to say something positive about the bus system. So I used to live on the Skip line, and the Skip comes by all the time. You don't even have to worry about when it's coming. You just step outside and it'll pick you up. At least this was true when I lived on it. I'm not sure if they've scaled back the service, but and the freedom to step outside and get a ride downtown and go spend an evening downtown, or ride your kid, you know, with take your kids somewhere on the bus, like. It's just so liberating. I mean, people associate the car with liberty and with independence and freedom, but it's such a weight. You know, there's so much expense, and then you have to figure out where to park the thing. And if you can just get dropped off downtown, it's really nice. And so if more people kind of had that vision of like how nice it would be, if you know, like. It's nice being driven someplace, you know.
No,
like this is why Uber and Lyft are so popular, because it's nice to just be taken someplace. And you might appreciate this as a mother. I feel like when I'm driving my kids somewhere, it's sort of me versus them. You know, like you know, there's noise going on. There's like it's not family. You know, wonderful time. Wonderful family time, but when I'm on the bus with my kids, it's like I am with we are together, you know.
That's exactly right.
So you know, it's pro-social, you know, being on a bus. I think.
No, it really is, and I think, you know, what you kind of captured there is this idea of convenience, right? That if we can just kind of step outside our homes and know that, we're going to be picked up within 10 minutes or so of getting there, right? That feels a lot better than, trying to check the schedule and, there's a bus that comes every 30 minutes or so, right? And if you happen to miss that bus, right, then you're kind of stuck there for another 30 minutes until the next one comes, right? So this idea of sort of frequent, service, I think is really an important one. And then just thinking about, where it's going to, and it is really driven by ridership, right? So then how do we kind of rally the community around thinking about doing more of this, right? It just becomes really important as we're working on achieving our climate goals and things like this. But, this is where I feel like our setting some concrete goals around what it is we want to see and the changes that we want to see as a city will really help, because it'll give guidance to our city manager, who can then give guidance to the staff departments and the different departments in our city, and start thinking about how we can actually do it. So, for example, what if we said, we are going to reduce the number of cars on the road in Boulder by 25% over the next 5 years, right? That's super ambitious, right?
Yeah.
But
can we also couple that with reducing the parking by 25%?
Yes,
There's
right?
so much asphalt in this city, and all the heat that absorbs. And
Exactly. And just, and thinking about those spaces, right? It's really hard now, as I've been learning more about housing and transportation and other things in our city, to kind of drive around and see, like you noted earlier, these asphalt parking lots, right? I look at that and I think that is space that could be used to meet our housing needs, to meet our, climate, some of our climate goals, right? To give us more, even agricultural space, right? Like places where we can have little community gardens that can sustain our community. But right now, we're using it for cars, for temporary storage of cars, right?
Potentially, sort of. That's the designated use, but the parking lots sit empty all the time, very frequently. It's actually an opportunity, I think. One of the city council potential candidates that was in the Raucous Caucus, his name is David. I'll have to look up his last name. He mentioned, bringing in faith communities as a way to make the city stronger. And for me, this is like a perfect opportunity for faith communities to think about the space that they occupy. I see a lot of church facilities that have very large parking lots that are way underutilized, and if we could have a partner in those faith communities that would be willing, maybe if we made it easier for those communities to reconfigure their properties in a way that benefited them and benefited the community, it created affordable housing. That maybe that's a nice possibility.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think we can think too about our faith communities as almost being like our businesses, in a sense, that not that they're profit driven, but that, people like to live close to their community centers, right?
Yeah.
And so the degree to which we can make our city more accessible and affordable for people, we can also enable people to live closer to where their faith communities are, right? And that idea of thinking about how we can build up our social infrastructure, right, and create these connection points in the community. There's actually evidence that places like that strengthen our community and strengthen our connections to each other protect us when we're faced with say a heat wave or a flood or something like that, right? We need more of these spaces, and so we need to be thinking about not just how are we helping our businesses or these other places, but how are we helping these social connection spaces in our community to thrive as well, because we can't ignore our social connections with each other and our emotions as we move through these really hard spaces. And my church, for example, is actually located downtown. They have a little section of parking that's kind of shared with some apartments up there. It's off of I don't know what the address is. It's on Pine Street. It's basically between Pine and Spruce on Broadway, on the west side of Broadway. First Congregational United Church of Christ, one of the older older churches in the area. And it really it is the sort of thing where the people who live within a mile or so of the church, they're walking there, right? People who are a little farther away, they can ride their bikes or take the bus. But, the people who are living up in Longmont, for example, because they couldn't afford space in Boulder, they're driving in, right? Especially on Sundays when, the bus is not running as frequently. So just thinking about, right, this as we make our community more affordable and more accessible to a broader range of people, we're really going to strengthen a lot of our social institutions too.
Very cool. So that almost segues into a loose thread I wanted to circle back on, and that is you were saying that you made the point that not everyone, from an accessibility point of view, not everyone can use bicycles, and it's also true that not everyone that can drive either. I think the thing that I want to say is that the most accessible neighborhood is a walkable neighborhood, right? So buses are fine too, but I mean, like if I think about where I would like to retire someday, I hope that I can walk for a very long time, and then I hope that I can get around on a wheelchair after that. And where will I go if I'm not in a walkable neighborhood? And so I think when we think about accessibility, like a dense, compact, walkable neighborhood is the best thing we can give to elderly people.
Right. No, I agree. Especially, just to help maintain social connections too as folks get older. And so where I grew up in Oregon, my mom still lives in the house that I grew up in, is a single family area, right, in this, unincorporated part of Clackamas County. And my street, at the end of my street, there is one street, and then there's a major highway. So there's not, a whole lot there, right?
There's no ice cream stand.
No, exactly. There's not, coffee shop or anything like that is walkable, right? It very much was made for people to live there and then work elsewhere, right? And my mother is still living there. She has Parkinson's disease, and as she, is thinking about where is it safe for me to, go and walk around, right? Exercise is one of the best things any of us can do at any age for our brains and just our overall health and well-being, right? But, even for her to, like, there are no sidewalks at all, for her to walk on. And so, as she is kind of getting older, her life is kind of getting just more limited to her home, right? And so the ways that our community is isolating people, right? It's not okay. It's not okay that we're doing this. And, and these are, the folks with chronic illnesses and we really need to be thinking about how we are creating cities that are more welcoming and inclusive for everyone. And this is where, for me, this idea of walkable communities really plays in, right? Because if she had sidewalks and a little corner market, she'd be there every day. I guarantee it, right? She's an introvert, but she still likes to see people. She will make up excuses just to, drive to the grocery store that's 1.5 miles from her house, right? But if we had spaces for her, that were safe for her to walk, she would do that. Right? And I would feel better about that because then, I know she's getting out and getting exercise and getting social interaction. But, we really need to think about how we can build up our communities, not just to kind of make it easier for us to get around and do so in a way that's not harming the climate, but also in ways that strengthen our connections to each other.
Awesome. That's beautiful. That's actually kind of a nice closer, unless you have any parting shots you want to make?
No, I don't think so. I'll just say thank you, for having me. And I also just really want to thank you and David for doing this podcast. As somebody who is still in the process of learning about some of these issues, even at a higher level, I really appreciate what you're doing to try to educate us. And I just want to give you a little kudos and just extra gratitude because, the best way to get people comfortable with change is to make it more familiar. And the more we're talking about these things, the more familiar it's getting for people. So I just really appreciate, this work that you're doing, not just to educate, but to help shift people's thinking around how we can create a city that's more welcoming and inclusive and resilient in the face of all the challenges that we have ahead of us.
I don't think of us as really bringing new ideas necessarily. Like lots of these ideas that we're talking about are kind of well known, and lots of people are talking about them. But I think like we all need to be talking about it, and so I hope that this podcast is one more voice that helps keep the conversation going and just kind of spread the word. And it really meant a lot to me when you replied that you had been listening to the podcast because Dave Ensign had recommended it to you. So anyways, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for all that you're doing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This episode of Sharing Boulder was produced by David Adamson and Philip Ogren. Sound and video editing was done by Philip Ogren. The intro music was sampled from Osladum by Gilberto Gil and is available for use under the Creative Commons Sampling Plus license. Please visit us at sharingboulder.us for show notes and previous episodes.